and a lot of these really hurt. For some reason, we just time skip over it, but unfortunately, it goes better for me and everybody else. I didn't buy it, and I'm glad for that. Are you kidding me? And like, I'll believe you. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we are going to be talking about my biggest disappointments of 2025. Alright, so before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, and Sam wanted to come say hi. But also make sure to tell me in the comments, what is the biggest disappointment you had this year? I am really bummed that I had enough disappointments in 2025 that they warrant their own video. Usually I combine my surprises and disappointments, but I had so many disappointments this year, and a lot of these really hurt. So, we got to talk about these. Now, I do just want to clarify, just because these books were disappointments does not necessarily mean I consider them bad books. Obviously, if I thought they were bad books or I didn't think there was anything good about them, they would be in my worst category, which we won't be doing today. Biggest disappointments just means that I obviously went into these books expecting I was really going to enjoy them. Maybe they were sequels to prior books I loved. Maybe they had characters I've really enjoyed. So let's dive right on in. Starting at the top is one for my Star Wars canon project that I am really bummed about, because I was very excited for this trilogy following a specific character that I felt like could really benefit from having her story expanded upon in novels. Unfortunately, I felt that the Queen's trilogy following Padme Amidala was a total letdown. I honestly don't know if perhaps it's just E.K. Johnston's writing style, or if maybe Disney just kind of crapped the bed with this character. Technically speaking, I actually started with the second book in this series because that's first one timeline order wise, and so we were following Padme as she's creating this team of handmaidens, which I thought was going to be really interesting because the planet Padme is from is actually very well known for young prodigies. With that, but also the fact that, you know, these women are being enlisted to help in these like political games, I expected the feel of the characters to be a little bit more mature, even if the story is young adult, but no, they very much felt their age, which really made me scratch my head when it came to the whole angle of the political plot line. Not to mention utilizing Panaka, the general who's tasked with protecting Padme, and having him come across as like a disapproving father figure just sort of worsened all of that. There's also a lot of this book that is laying out the events of the Phantom Menace film until we get to like the last fourth, and we basically just speed run through the entire events of that film, but through Padme and her handmaidens' perspectives. But we work through it so fast, you can't appreciate anything new that comes with having this different perspective. Moving back to the first book, but like the second in timeline order, this one I do feel like was better. Padme is actually 18, and she is still kind of getting used to this new role as a senator. Unfortunately, though, a lot of this book was just kind of boring. We alternate back and forth between Padme's perspective and then that of Sabe, who is the one that most often takes Padme's place because they look so similar. Another major problem I had with these books is the voices of a lot of the handmaidens were very interchangeable. That made the most sense here because Sabe has spent so much of her life trying to seem like she is Padme. It actually did make sense. There was a logical reason for that. And going along with that, I actually felt like there was this great opportunity to really do so much exploration of Sabe's character, tying that in with Padme's character and the relationship between these two women, but it just didn't get nearly enough attention for my taste. By the end of the book, I don't feel like anything especially impactful to the universe had actually taken place. And then we have the final book, Queen's Hope, which I was really bummed out about because at this point we get to see Padme and Anakin as a couple, and obviously their relationship is very complicated. Once again, the potential there was just wasted. The time that is mentioned where these two actually get to, you know, be a couple together is completely glossed over. A ton of time there. You could have dived into some elements to really expand upon the relationship and make it more convincing. But for some reason, we just time skip over it, and then kind of a rinse repeat of my situation with Padme and Sabe. Like I said, I don't know if all of the fault lays on Johnston's shoulders. It's possible some of it is Lucasfilms or Disney, but one way or another, this entire series felt like such wasted potential, and I'm still bitter about it. Next one is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. I finally finished out my Allison Saft author taste test, and what a roller coaster ride that was. I'll put a link to that up above because the first book I loved. I gave it 5 stars. This one, it started really great. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked the relationship that was developing between the two of them. There's so many elements of the fantastical world that are really interesting. There are fantastical religious elements explored here, which is something I always really enjoy, and I really liked in the first book I read by this author, so I was hoping to enjoy them in the second book. But unfortunately, there were too many elements in the story that I felt like none of them could really flourish. But the big one, whenever we finally figure out the perpetrator behind the crime that they're trying to solve and the motive for that, without talking too many spoilers, it's basically a person trying to fight against colonization. And then the main characters villainize them. Like, I'm still scratching my head over this as to like, why did Saft decide to go in this direction? What happened here to make her think this was a good idea? So the first half of this book I was loving. The second half, such a letdown. Next up is a book that I honestly am expecting to see on numerous people's biggest disappointment lists, and that is going to be Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I'm an Emily Henry stan. I love her. If she writes it, I'm going to read it, which is why I went out and bought this when it came out and then was let down by it. This actually is currently my least favorite of her stuff. Don't necessarily think this is a bad book. I do believe Emily Henry is a romance author. I think she just writes romance books that have a lot of literary fiction elements. Again, that's something I really enjoy. I think it helps build out the characters. It makes them more convincing. It makes the relationship that much more intoxicating and gets you that much more invested into it. This time though, I really think this book was more literary fiction with like a side of romance, and the romance that is there felt very insta-lusty. And unfortunately, this time around, I wasn't really ever invested in the romance. I felt like Hayden, the hero character, never became a three-dimensional character in comparison to some of Henry's other books. The third act conflict also felt very predictable, but at the same time, like really blown out of proportion, something where a very simple sentence could have helped alleviate so much of the drama. And then there is some work done to the female main character, Alice, but what is there, I didn't feel like got as much attention because Henry was trying to build out this character work around, what's her name, Margaret? Around Margaret, who Alice and Hayden are interviewing, like the whole premise of the story. I didn't really care that much about Margaret. That was not why I was reading this book. I was reading this book for the romance, and the romance was very lackluster. I do still own this one. Was annotating it when I did read it, but I've actually never gone back to annotate this last section of it, which I ended up listening to on audiobook. I haven't read a Emily Henry book on audio since the very first time I read Beach Read, and that was because it was my first book by her, and I didn't know I was going to absolutely devour it and want to annotate the crap out of it. Still bummed about this one. I'm hoping whatever Henry comes out with next goes better for me and everybody else. Sadly, another disappointment, also from one of my beloved romance authors, was Sarah Hogle's second book in the Moonville series, I believe it is, The Folklore of Forever. I've come to discover that Sarah Hogle is like a hit or miss author for me. I do love her because the books, when they hit so well. Another one where like she has really phenomenal character work done, and it always makes the romances that much better. Not to mention, she's just flat out hilarious, but sometimes I feel like she goes a little too far, a little too over the top, and this was one of those. I did not feel very much about the romance at all, whereas the first book in this series is like a sprinkling of magical realism. It's very much like if you believe in it, it's there. If you don't believe in it, you can just call it coincidence. This second one, however, is straight up fantasy. There is no denying it at all. And it just was really jarring in comparison to the first book. But along with that, the way this like fantastical element is used with the characters, it unfortunately didn't really work for me. Then the climax just like went so off the walls to the point where I didn't even really understand what was happening anymore. I'm going to continue reading from this author because most of the time I love her, but this one, I didn't buy it, and I'm glad for that. Next is an author that I've been highly anticipating because she has a lot of queer historical mystery romances. All of that together, up my alley. sounds like something I'm going to enjoy. And given the fact that she has so many, well, if I love one, then I'm gonna want to read the rest of her backlist and love all of them as well. But unfortunately, my first of KJ Charles's books just didn't really work for me. I read Slippery Creatures, which is the first in the Will Darling series, and I believe it's set in like the 1940s? 30s. I think it's after World War I. I actually did enjoy Will, the main character. I thought the mystery element was actually pretty well done overall, and how the author actually ended up working everything out to make this end in a happily ever after was great, but I didn't like the romance. Kim, the love interest, is so hot and cold. He manipulates and lies to Will numerous times. So by extension, he just came across really self-centered, and any romantic moments didn't feel authentic. They felt like he was just continuing to manipulate Will to get whatever it was he needed. Given the fact that the rest of the series continues following the same couple and, seeing as they make strides to become an actual couple, I imagine, I don't want to watch that. I don't want to read it. I do want to try more from this author. If you have any recommendations, please leave them down below. I would love to hear them, but I still need to get over this. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. Then we have The Unworthy by Agustina Bazterrica. This one's really complicated. I read it for my racing to finish my horror bingo. I'll put a link to that blog up above. The setup of it was so up my alley because it's like a religious cult. It's a post-apocalyptic based around environmental factors world, which isn't. It kind of goes in line with dystopians and just isn't really my thing normally, but it's also sapphic, and then it's written in a what's the word I want? Epistolary. It's an epistolary style. So like 3 out of 4 major things is really up my alley. I thought I was gonna love this, but it just kind of didn't really do what I wanted. There were a lot of things we don't get answers about. With this sort of story, I want answers, and then it felt like the things we did get answers about were stuff I was expecting. This is definitely one where like I had certain expectations going into it based on the synopsis I kept hearing, and the book did not really deliver on those expectations. I want to try more from this author. I'm hoping I will enjoy some of her other stuff, but this one was not the new fave I thought it was going to be. I've also got A Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. This was a queer botanical version of Frankenstein. Really wanted to enjoy it. There were a lot of themes in it that I did actually like, but I think having this third perspective in the story was kind of a detractor for me. I also didn't feel as though the characterization of the main couple was always consistent, and where the story ended up going wasn't really satisfying. How things wrap out, it's kind of one of those where I was just like, okay, that's the end. What next? Still bummed about that one. I really liked the cover. Then I have got Ladies in Hating by Alexandra Vasti. This is the third in a series. I already had the first one on my TBR, and then this was a sapphic historical romance, so I was like, heck yes, I want this. Requested a copy from NetGalley and was able to get it. But unfortunately, I don't know if necessarily this author's romance writing doesn't work for me, or maybe it's just the fact that like she can't write sapphic romance. Because I have actually heard good things about the prior books in this series, but this one, it didn't work out. It was in Celeste. The L word is dropped pretty quickly, like way too fast for my taste. All of their internal monologuing was way too wrapped up in their own personal issues, and it felt like, okay, you guys need to work this out before you even try to consider making a relationship work. I also got so fed up with the fact that one of the main characters has a serious martyr complex. Apart from that, I also went into this thinking that there was going to be like a haunted manor element, and honestly, I felt like it was very underutilized. And they are actually rivals as novelists. And for being novelists, these two sure are at a loss for words a lot, which, are you kidding me? So many issues between the two of them either started or were dragged out because they simply could not figure out a way to string a sentence together, and that's just so ridiculous and lazy writing in my opinion. I did really enjoy learning more about queer history and literature, but like that alone was not enough to save the rest of this book. I'm still on the fence on if I'm going to try the prior books in the series. I don't know. We'll see. Next up is one that hurt so badly. I read this for my continuing 5-star series video. I really wanted to love this book, and it did not deliver. That's going to be A Theory of Dreaming by Reid. This is another author that unfortunately I have found is very hit or miss for me. So I loved Study in Drowning so much, but Theory of Dreaming, it doesn't need to exist. This story feels like a rinse repeat, just from a different character's perspective. We're once again watching a character of this couple lose grip with reality, and doing so to escape from the horrors of the real world that they are experiencing at that time. I think that could have actually been really well done and had some delightful parallels. This book falls down because we are split between Preston and Effie's perspective. Effie has a full-blown character arc in the first book. Like, we really see her go through it and grow. Not to say like she's a whole new person at the end of the first book, but she really did transform. And this one, it felt like she backslid so drastically. And because there was so much time of this book dedicated to watching that unfold, the element around Preston where you actually could have done some new interesting things, or again, like paralleled with the events of the first book in a very interesting way. There wasn't enough time to build those elements out. They weren't getting enough attention to really make them interesting. Also, when it came to the romance, it felt like the end of this book was telling us that your mental health will magically be healed so long as somebody loves you, especially in a young adult book. I don't think that's a message you should be pushing. So I'm still very bummed about this. I'm still a little bitter about this. And I think there's supposed to be a novella coming out that I don't know exactly what it is, but it's supposed to be set in the same universe. And like after what happened here, I don't think I need to read it. I don't really want to read it. I just want to go back to Study and Drowning and loving that book. And last, but I don't know if I would say least necessarily, but another end of a series that was a letdown. Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. I've really enjoyed the Founders trilogy, but this one feels very different in comparison to the first two books. The first two books have this like heist feel to the story, even if they're not necessarily performing heists. That's sort of what they remind you of. That's the feel of them. This one, however, is very war focused, and like it makes sense for the events that have taken place in the series, but I think there was an opportunity to kind of return to that heist feel, and we didn't do that. Not only that, but I also felt like this was the first time where the author went a little bit too far when it came to the magic system. Though he did continue coming up with these interesting and unique new ways to have these characters scribe things and make it work for them. Every single time there was a new one presented, he would deep dive into it, and because they're getting more and more complicated, it's requiring more time to explain how they work. And it hit the point where it's like, I don't care. I don't need to know all of the little gritty details to explain how this is working. Tell me what it does, and like I'll believe you. Along with that, I also was really bummed at, even though I do like 3 out of the, I'd say 5 main characters we see from here, I just don't feel like the magic from the second book was there. The dynamics that were in play there. Finally, when it comes to the ending, I actually do like how this book ends, but I like how this book ends as an ending to this book. I don't know if I like this ending for the series. Actually, I don't think I like this ending for the series, honestly. It sort of feels like the author went a little too big in this last one. It just went a little too far. I loved the first 2 books, and I could see myself rereading them in the future. I don't really know if I would do the same with this 3rd book. I wish this would have been like a 5-star series on the whole, but it was not. All right, so on that sad note, that's officially it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's leave a frowning emoji in the comments. I have links to all my socials, as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!